I really wonder what that AI companion actually does for these recordings. I
Lots
should
of
probably
typos. I know that much.
I should probably look into that at some point.
Let's
Okay.
see how many different ways it spells custodies throughout this doc.
Yeah, actually, that would be funny. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to CanHammer, your source for 40K from the Great White North. That was my Chris Haynes impression.
Pretty close.
Pretty close, yeah. I think we are Chris less again this week. Work has been very busy for him, so you're stuck with me, Francois, your host, and my wonderful co-host is here.
Hey, it's Logan back again.
So it's last time Logan and I did this together. We got a lot of reviews that the show was better without Chris. Now I'm quite sure that those were joke reviews, but we're gonna choose to believe that they're actually real, and that Logan and I are just much better hosts than Chris ever could be.
If we get the same feedback twice, it must be true, right?
Yes, we can kick him off his own show. We also got a lot of comments about our contagious giggles.
Yes, yeah. It was described as a rich person laugh, I think. Like we actually
Yes.
enunciate the ha when we laugh.
I believe that is what someone said. Yes. Anyway, today we have a very exciting show for all of you. CanHammer Teams is here almost. As of time of recording, we are 48 hours away from CanHammer Teams, and I will post this recording very quickly because it is time sensitive.
Mhm.
We have the most exciting tournament of the year in all of Canada. Sorry, Western folks, I'm going to claim all of Canada for this one. The CanHammer Team Tournament is at our door, and we're going to be doing a preview of that, as well as talking about some very tasty, interesting leaks about the upcoming Custodes and Orc Codexes. Ooh, lots of fascinating stuff going on there. But before we do, let's do our traditional hobby roundup. Logan, what have you been working on recently?
Yeah, so I've finished off a bunch of Eldar stuff that I was working on, which is probably a good thing given the Custodes changes that are coming, and just doing some touch ups on the
Spoiler alert.
Custodes army I'm taking to CanHammer Teams. But yeah, I haven't been starting any new big projects. I got a lot of travel coming up, so I'll probably actually be off the podcast for a few episodes as well. But don't want to get stuff started just to leave it half finished and have to come back to it and try to figure out how I was mixing paints and all that for batch work if I can. What about you?
Yeah. Oh, still in this very strange painting an army for a future undefined event mode, which is very, very weird for me. I generally tend to be highly event motivated when it comes to painting and just paint whatever I need for the next event. It's rare that I just paint for painting's sake, but I've been doing that with these GSC for, well, a couple of months now. I've been talking about them for the last few episodes, and I still have not run out of motivation. I have now painted 90 GSC infantry, still with the wonderful Speed Paint 2.0 from the Army Painter. They are not sponsoring us, but I will say great things about that paint. I love it. Yeah, that's right. It's pre pandering that I'm doing here. No, I legitimately love those paints. It makes painting all these GSC models very easy, and my son is assembling them for me. I hire my son to do my assembly now, and he gets a little bit of pocket money, and I get to skip the part of the hobby that I personally don't enjoy. And he does a good job, and so I just keep handing him GSC Combat Patrol boxes and say, "Here, $40 if you assemble this for me." And then they get assembled very quickly.
That's a good rate too.
It's a lot of models. It's basically $1 per model for the assembly, which is reasonable, I think. And then I paint them, and I'm starting to work on my 4th Combat Patrol now. I figure the idea is to do all of the infantry first, and then I've done a couple of trucks too, but do all of the infantry and then leave the characters that have a little bit more, that I can put a little bit more effort in for later, because I figure eventually I'll get sick of painting all of these neophytes. But anyway, it's been exciting. It's been fun. I have no idea when or even if I will ever put those models on the table, because right now GSC is not exactly in a great spot. But whenever I decide to, they will be ready. So that's what I've been up to. And cool. We do want to spotlight a couple other events before we get to CanHammer Teams. We have a couple of GTs coming up locally in Ottawa. There's a April GT at the Dragon April 27. There's a couple of tickets left for that, although it is filling fast. It may even be full. I haven't looked in a couple of days. And we have after that in May another one, still a smaller GT, but the Capital Clash, which is Dan's birthday GT. So that should be very exciting.
I think there's golden tickets with that one as well, right?
Are there? Maybe.
I heard something. I'm not sure if that's true, so check the players pack.
I've been paying less attention to golden ticket news since I have mine.
Spoiled.
But possibly, yes. We will confirm with that and get back to you on that on the next episode. The other exciting tournament coming up is, of course, going to be the Breath Weapon Gaming 40K Teams in June, another 8-man team event. We are really spoiled up in Ottawa for all these 8-man team events. Last I checked, they had 16 teams registered, which is pretty crazy. 16 teams being 80 plus something like 120 plus players, which is massive. Yep. Not quite CanHammer team size, but getting close. Still tickets available for that, and it's still a couple of months out. So I expect a couple more teams will probably register. But of course, the main event, short of WTC, my favorite event of the year, definitely, in my opinion, the best event in Canada. The CanHammer teams, long storied history of CanHammer teams. People are always very excited for that one. It always sells out immediately. Even this year, which was a little surprising because they went from 5-man to 8-man team, and it's 178 players total. It's massive. And also the date got changed at the last minute because there was a small venue issue.
A wee little issue.
A wee little misunderstanding, yes. So despite all of that, it immediately sold out, and there's going to be 178 players descending on the EY Center here in Ottawa from far and wide, all over Canada, from Western Canada, from the United States. I don't believe we have any Europeans, but maybe one day. And it's going to be the best. So as we said, 22 8-man teams. We are going to briefly talk about who's there, who to watch out for, what the cool lists are. But before we do, thanks to the lovely Jeremy Atkinson and the folks behind StatCheck, I actually have a faction breakdown of CanHammer teams. So we can talk about the choices that the teams made. I have the numbers. Logan, you're going to guess for me. Guess what faction is most represented with 20 teams taking them.
20 teams for the same faction.
So that's 20 of 22 teams, or a 90% rate.
I'm going to say Necrons. Just off
Good guess. It is, in fact, Necrons.
I'm shocked.
And you would not have been too far off if you had said Custodes, because Custodes are in the number 2 position with 16 teams taking them. That is a 72% take rate, which is significantly lower than Necrons still, but well above the next one, which you will never guess. The next one with 10 teams.
10.
Actually, there's 2. One of them is Astra Militarum. That's kind of logical, but the other one is a surprise. 10 teams have taken this.
10 teams. Tyranids?
World Eaters.
World Eaters. Okay, interesting.
I know. I was shocked when I saw that. 10 World Eaters.
That's going to be a fun choice into a 70% Custodes layout as well.
Well, that's the beauty of team events. You can just say
you can
anything but the Custodes.
Yeah, very true.
And in 8s, you can't pin as easily, so you can usually escape your bad matchup. But I was surprised. World Eaters is near and dear to my heart. I love that army. I do think it has a place in teams. We are not taking them, but we were close. It was, for me, between the Death Guard and the World Eaters, and I do think that World Eaters have a little bit more upside. They can bring in higher scores, but they're also less stable than the Death Guard. So I picked the Death Guard for our team to have kind of this baseline of very stable scores we could sort of rely on as I'll take something that the rest of the team doesn't want, and I'll generally be able to just score very reliably in it. That's just a different role, but we came close to bringing World Eaters. Still, I'm a little surprised that 10 teams are bringing World Eaters. After that, it's still wide open. We have 9 teams, took Eldari, Tau, Chaos Knights, Death Guard, and Grey Knights. So those all sort of make sense, although the Tau number is a little bit higher and the CK number a little bit higher than I would have guessed. But CK sort of makes sense.
Seems high for that. Though again, in 8s, you've got the option to dodge a lot of bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then as we go down the line, the next one at 8 is Leagues of Votan. I was also a little bit surprised by that. Leagues of
Yeah.
Votan has not been seeing as much play recently. But again, teams is a very different meta, so there's ways for leagues to leverage their incredible shooting, especially since we should specify half those tables will be player placed and
Yeah.
half will be WTC. So that does introduce a an element to your faction choice that is kind of wild when you think about it. Because if you're a first or second defender, you can guarantee yourself a player placed table, which is for us anyway. I don't know about you guys, Logan, but for us, it made our army choices and pairing matrix much more complicated than usual.
Yeah, it played a lot into our list design. Like our team's ethos has mostly been to play what we can turn into a competent team layout, but we are much more focused on having folks play armies they are comfortable with rather than what's necessarily great in the meta. Because we've tried meta chasing with it, and it works for some people, and some people it just does not click.
Yep.
So a big part of the rest is, okay, cool. What army are you comfortable with? And what type of terrain do you want for it? How can we drop you in a way that's going to make that happen? And player placed has some pretty significant impacts on list design as well for each of those factions. I think it's a cool dynamic to have in there, despite some of the complaints about player placed.
Yeah, it's a cool dynamic. I would rather personally have nothing but WTC tables, but that is my WTC slant showing there. I understand that a lot of people think that it's cool that we get to experiment with the player placed in this way. In our list choice, part of the reason it's not I'm not selling any state secrets here. People will quickly understand which of our list is the one that is designed to play on player placed, and that is of course Jeremy's plain list. That list functions on WTC tables and can work quite well on there, as he proved that all is dust. And so if we need to hold it for later on, we can, but it is also terrifying if it can create its own moving lanes and shooting lanes on half the table, because the challenge with that army being ability to move around. So if you can guarantee that that's going to work, it's great. Moving down the list, we have 7 Black Templars, 7 Tyranids. Again, Tyranids are a good choice for teams, but maybe a little bit higher than I'd expect. Then Orcs at 6, Sisters at 6. See, that's low. I feel like Sisters are probably the best team's army in the game right now, but they're hard to play, hard to collect, expensive, not super prevalent in the meta. Not a ton of people own Sisters armies. So that's probably why they're a little bit lower than I would expect. But they are a fantastic team's army in the sense that they are very reliable scorers. Again, a little bit like that Death Guard. And they can push differential, but they're generally not there for that. Then we have 5 Dark Angels. At least one of those is Dark Angels, quote unquote, and I'm guessing all of them actually are, which means Azrael is in there for the CP, and then it's just like Plains or like some sort of Iron Storm list. There's probably a hero or two that's actually playing Dark Angels, and if you are, I shout out to you, because that's very courageous right now.
Yeah, there is one guy, I think it's on bottom table Titans, who's taking a full like Deathwing setup.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I love that.
It's going to be great to see.
Yep. 5 CSM, 5 Gene Stealer Cults. Again, those are a little high because those armies are not doing great right now. 3 Imperial Knights, 3 Blood Angels, 2 Space Wolves, 2 Adeptus Mechanicus, 2 heroes.
Yeah, brave.
With Adeptus Mechanicus, and 1 generic Space Marine that's probably an Iron Storm or something. So that's the lineup for CanHammer teams. It's a very diverse lineup. We have 26 different factions represented. No, sorry, 25 different factions represented. Of course, that separates all the Space Marines. So if you group the Space Marines, it's more like 20. But I feel that shows that the meta is actually in a fairly good place, right?
Yeah, I'd agree for sure. And that's one of the great things about teams. And we already touched on this a little bit. There's so many things you will see that are not viable in singles events, even from a faction standpoint, that can really shine in a team setting. Like GSC have just sort of been getting dumpstered in singles, but they can be very good in teams. I think we saw that at Alpine Cup, at Pyra. Pyra, they had like an average score of 15 or 16.
Wow, that's because there was one player.
Okay, well,
who I assume is both extremely good with GSE, but also probably was very protected in pairings.
yeah,
But they certainly can
you can
perform.
make that
Yes.
happen though. Is the cool thing with it. So
And in fact, I'm looking at this breakdown, and I can't, other than like a weird Titan Legion factions, I think they're all there. I can't think of a faction that is not represented. We have your Drukari, we have your GSC, we have your Mechanicus. Like everything seems to be there, and that's
got a
great.
lot of orcs.
That's really
It's cool to
fantastic.
see.
Fantastic to see. Yes. So exciting times coming, and I can't wait to just see people. It's going to be wonderful. They're spread out on a few different teams, but the entirety of Team Canada, the players will be there, and so that's exciting. And a lot of our friends that we see seldom at events. A lot of them, if they were coming to one event, it's going to be this one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of for Eastern Canada and the Toronto to Montreal, Quebec City area. Anyway, it's the annual mecca of Warhammer. We have at least one player, I know this because he's on my team, coming from out west. That is Riley and his brother, actually. So that's two. And then we have a couple of guys coming from the Maritimes as well. So we do cover quite the geographic span. There is one player on Team Red Dragon, my good friend Tim Penny, coming from Florida. So the geographic spread is wonderful. If I remember, on Friday, I'm going to see him on Friday. I'm going to show up wearing my Team America Tim Penny shirt.
Nice. You don't have a Team USA 40K tattoo as well hiding somewhere?
I do not, no, because I was smart enough not to take that dumb bet. And for anyone listening who needs some context about this, last WTC, for some god-awful reason, both Jeremy and Dan decided to accept a tattoo bet from Anthony Vanella on Team USA. And the bet was very dumb because they bet that I, François Lalonde, would score more differential points than Anthony Vanella throughout the tournament. He was playing World Eaters and his job was to go get 20s. I was playing Death Watch and my job was eventually to get 3 points into Eldar every game. So the actual, I think the actual difference in battle points was about as large as is possible because he mostly got his 20s and his very high scores. And I was thrown under the Eldar bus 3 separate times in the team event. And so for that reason, Jeremy and Dan, who are good sports to have gone through with it, now have Team America 40K tattoos on their legs.
It's fantastic. If they ever have to go down south, get apply for U.S. citizenship, I'm sure it's going to help.
Exactly. They have an American flag tattooed on their body now because of that. The WTC can get very silly sometimes. It's extremely serious, but also extremely not.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I've been talking a lot. Logan, I'm going to throw it to you because you've been deep diving through some of the CanHammer teams list, and we want to shout out some lists that we think are particularly interesting. If you're not, if we don't shout out your list, it's not because it's not interesting. We may have missed it, but Logan has picked out a few for us to discuss. Take it away.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to preface this by saying the focus on this is stuff that just seems cool and is jumping out at me. Like it's kind of oddball stuff more than this is an amazing list because there's a lot of those, right? Like that's sort of the point of the event. So some of the ones that have jumped out at me, I guess to start, that does sort of fit the meta, so to speak, is Eric's 6 Nemesis Dread Knights, 3 Armigers, and a Land Raider Redeemer. I know this has been popping up a lot lately. It's one hell of a stat check to play against, but it just looks super cool because it's like 10 models and it's your entire army.
You're playing Knights with if Armigers were good and teleported.
Exactly. So I thought that one was just a fun one to see. He took it to all his dust as well and did quite well with it. I got a golden ticket actually running it.
It looks absolutely ridiculous, but it's an extremely powerful list. Yeah. I think it came out of Germany originally. They started experimenting with that. There's also a version without the Armigers, but with triple Land Raider Redeemers.
I have seen that one around. Yeah.
I think that one is even more powerful, but no one owns 3 Land Raider Redeemers. So maybe why
they've been out of stock forever too.
Yeah, I have one, but who would ever need 3?
Yeah, you can crowdsource your army.
Yeah.
One of the other, I guess, 2 of the others to sort of lump these together that are kind of fun to see is there is one absolute hero who is bringing a Tesseract Vault.
Yes.
So I think he's hedging his bets on playing on player place the entire event because that thing's
Well, I'm
going to
pretty
be
sure he has to
so
be a
moving.
defender and grab a player play stable because that
Yeah,
thing is about 10 inches wide and cannot move anywhere, even with teleports on a WTC table.
yeah, it's gonna be fun to see what happens. And then slightly more mobile is Nick on Team Red Dragon running two monoliths, which I
Yeah,
know
that list is
is a
actually good.
thing.
That
Yeah,
is
it's
a real
certainly a
thing.
thing. But it's gonna be super fun to see because we've gone from like what a 15-year span of never seeing a monolith because they've just been trashed, and now having armies that have two of them
Yeah.
dropping on the table and being a legit threat. It's great.
So the thought behind that one is one monolith is very common in a Necron Hypercrypt because it gets you you can teleport it and 3-inch deep strike it with the strat, but you can pull units to it with the
Mhm.
Infinity Gate, and that's very powerful and gives you a lot of mobility. And if you add a second monolith, well, that's a second Infinity Gate, so you can start moving your infantry around very effectively, and also the monolith itself is a very good shooting platform. So that one is not like the Tesseract Vault. I'm sorry, Alex. It's a bit of a meme. It's a cool meme,
Yeah,
but it's a bit of a meme. Double monolith is actually a real list.
yeah. It is. Anyway, cool one to see for sure. Some of the other fun stuff that's popping up here going into the Tyranid world is there is somebody who's bringing two Screamer Killers and two Norns in a monster
Yeah,
mash list, which is
nice.
just fun to see. Like those models are awesome. And this is one where you building your GSC might have some insights. I have not come across this. There is a GSC list that actually has 25 Pure Serene Gene Sealers in it,
Hmm.
which is again cool to see. I haven't seen Gene Sealers on the table since the early 2000s. So what am I missing with this?
That's the I hope I go first the list because
Okay.
Pure Strain Gene Stealers in GSC infiltrate, so you can
Yep.
have them up the board and then they just go and charge. It's powerful if you go first. If
Yeah.
you go second, well, you better hope you have some staging points, otherwise you're losing a lot of points of your army right away. But what you can do is pair that with aberrants that have the infiltrate enhancement on a character with them, and you have like 700 points of your army that can get a turn one charge if you do that and go first. Very powerful.
Yep.
If you go first.
Yeah.
I would be I would be very concerned about what happens if you go second because you have 700 points of your list like right there in front of your opponent.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why that exists.
I know we've seen that secret to victory a few times in the past. It's just
Roll better.
roll to go. Yeah, skill issue, right?
This brings us back to Will Paul's casino planes with his orcs back in the day, where he would just like shine his go first button and tap it and go first like 5 times out of 6 in an event.
Yep. It's a great way to win. Great way to
Yeah.
win. Some of the other fun stuff, which I think is interesting tech for teams or even for singles. There's a Black Templar list that's coming, running 80 Crusaders, 80, so 420-man units, which is
that is
that's
a
a
pain
lot of
in the
meat to
ass
get
to
through.
remove.
Yeah, a lot of meat. Not characters in all of them. I think he's stuck with 6 up, feel no pains on 2 of the units, but whatever. Like you have that much
Still-
power armor with feel no
Still
pains.
very hard to remove. Yes.
Yep. One of the other cool things that's popped up is we're talking about Votan earlier and how it's a bit of maybe an off meta choice for it. Most of the lists are running at least 2 land forts, with several of them running 3 land forts. So they are really using those as a Hearthguard delivery device to just push up the table and get stuff out very, very quickly, which is going to be cool to see. They're cool models.
Yep.
And one of the other fun pieces of tech that sort of speaks to me as a fellow Eldar player for this is Jonathan, who I think is one of the WTC folks, right?
Correct. Yeah. He's from
is-
out east on Team Red Dragon.
Yeah, he is running double Way Leapers in his list. One with
Mhm.
Phoenix Gem to just sort of sit at the back of the board and give him CP and do some area denial stuff back there. And a second one with Fate's Messenger to just run up and be able to melt his stuff very reliably, which is cool to see.
Well, the other players like using the Autark aggressively. It's very effective. And I, in fact, would not be surprised if he used both rather aggressively. The Autarks let you do things because of the low NOP and
Mhm.
their mobility, because they're incredibly fast, let you go in and reach out and do things that can throw wrenches in your opponent's plan. I don't know what exactly his plan is, but my guess is one stays at the back, but not the entire game. And
Mhm.
eventually you've got 2 super annoying lone-ups like running around and doing things.
Yeah. Well, when you can move 34 inches in a turn with those things for 2
Yeah,
CP,
it's
you get
absolutely
why not, right?
ridiculous, Yeah.
Very cool. Anyway, those are the things that have really jumped out at me. As Francois said, if there's stuff that you think is neat, this is not supposed to be an exhaustive list by any stretch. This is just what I've been poking at going through the pairings. So yeah, really exciting spread of armies that are out there. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff. I think regardless, I say this, it sounds very defeatist. Regardless of how well my team does, we are really, really looking forward to playing against some really unique armies, meeting new people, and just having a blast. So it's gonna be a fun event for everyone.
Yeah, it should be amazing. And we have no particularly spicy round one pairings. There could always be upsets, but there's none of the quote unquote big teams are paired round one. It'll be interesting to see how everyone does. I'm gonna shout out Stud or Scrub here. I think their team comp is very interesting. They have a very off meta for 8-mans anyway team comp. Part of that because of course Dustin and Ridvin are playing Drukari and GSC. But they also have demons, they have Chaos Knights, they have a team comp that I would not expect to see in 8-mans. And so I'm going to be, because they're good players, keeping a close eye on what they do this weekend and how they manage, and if their off-meta picks manage to give them a pairings advantage or not. That's one I'm keeping an eye on. Do you have a team you're keeping an eye on, Logan?
Yeah, Stud is definitely one of those. The other one that I'm excited to follow through this is Team Red Dragon. We're good buddies with most of the folks on the team. It's going to be cool to see. They have just a rock solid team comp for this. It's eight good players. It's 8 people with also very, very good looking armies. So it's fun to see that the full breadth of the hobby for it. I'm hoping they do well. I'm also hoping we absolutely crush them into the ground if we get paired. But they're going to be fun to follow and compare notes with.
Yes, I'll tell you that when my team did our mock pairings and matrices, Team Red Dragon stood out as the one that felt like it might be the most challenging on paper. So they're definitely a very strong team to watch out for. But it's anyone's game. There's a lot of very strong teams, and you never know. Strange things happen, especially in 8-mans.
Yep.
All right, so that's for CanHammer teams. We're all super excited, and we will be giving you a more detailed summary of what happened exactly next week, because for once, we'll do back-to-back episodes. CanHammer teams, I think, deserves back-to-back episodes. We will be back with a recap of CanHammer teams next week. For now, however, we have some very exciting news to talk about. These are leaks, of course, so take them with a grain of salt, but they do come from reliable places. The Custodes ones are literally pictures of the book, so those we can assume are real. The Orc ones are, I believe we found those on Auspex Tactics, yep. But he's generally fairly accurate whenever, so he probably saw pictures and then transcribed them to not cause problems for his source. So we expect that these are all real. But of course, as per usual, grain of salt. How about I take the Custodes and you do the Orcs, Logan?
Sounds great.
And I will take I play neither of these armies, but I am a well-known Custodes non-enjoyer. I complain about Custodes a lot, so I will take the Custodes. I like to joke that Custodes playstyle is the most boring in the game because it's summarized as stand there and roll 4-ups, which angers Chris to no end whenever I say that. And of course, that's not true. It's a joke, and I like to poke the bear, aka Chris, by telling him that his army requires no skill and he's just rolling 4-ups all game.
It's 2 different 4-ups, right?
Exactly. The feel no pain and the involved. It's 2 different kinds of 4-ups. I do personally do not enjoy the Custodes playstyle. I personally think it's boring, and I don't like playing into it either because they invalidate melee armies and you can get scammed by 4-ups. That said, I feel kind of bad for Custodes players right now. I was hoping that the Codex wouldn't be an overpowered monster like 9th edition Custodes or even current Custodes, who are quite strong. But I fear like that one might have gone a little too far the other way. It's rough. Custodes players, I've been complaining online, and normally I would make fun of them, but I have a difficulty doing so right now because actually I think, oh, this is quite bad. And so here's a quick bird's eye view on what happened to Custodes. So they got 4 new detachments, and I say new because while the old one exists in name, it is completely reworked, so it might as well be a new detachment. Almost all of the good rules are gone. That's the big change. They lost their Fights First access, both in strat form and on Trajan's datasheet. They lost their -1 damage strat. They what's the other one that they lost? They lost the -1 damage to Fights First, and
no more -1 damage, no more Fights First. The 4+.
They lost
we can talk about
Kata.
that
They
one.
lost the -1 to hit Kata. There's another good strat that they lost.
They can't bring guys back
now.
anymore.
Okay, that one too. And so that was huge for shortening charges. Basically, most of the good stuff is either not there or reworked in a weird way. They lost their 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal and dev wounds. Now it's conditional or a strat. Their detachments are super fluffy, so that's good, I guess. They have a Sisters detachment. They have a Combines Arm detachment. They have a Character detachment. All the strats in that one are epic deeds, by the way, which I think is incredible. Because while extremely fluffy, it means that the free strat ability of the captains do not work in the Character detachment.
Yeah, it's pretty clear this was written like a year ago.
It's very weird. So it's not all doom and gloom. There were some side grades and some buffs. For instance, katas you now choose per unit, which is good. It means that if you have one unit fighting infantry, you give them the exploding. If you have one unit fighting a monster, you give them the lethal. But they lost a -1 to hit kata. It's now a 1 CP strat for one of the detachments. So that's either a buff or a side grade. It's definitely not a nerf, although the -1 to hit kata was quite important to Custodes' defensive buffs. Some of the strats are good. The Combines Arm detachment has a great strat. It's a reactive move strat, which is fantastic. Having a 1 CP reactive move like on demand is one of the best things you can have in the game. However, the actual bonus for that detachment only works if your sister's unit is within 6 inches of your Custodes unit, and those are T3 3-up save models. They are going to immediately die, right?
With 1 wound.
Yes, with 1 wound. It feels awful. We'll see. Maybe there's a build. Maybe people are dooming and glooming, but even I, as someone who is well known for not enjoying Custodes, I kind of feel bad. That feels like they got the AdMech rider on that codex.
Yeah, it's odd, and actually the other strat that went away is Slayer of Nightmares. There's no more.
There you go. The +1 to wound. Yeah. That's also huge.
Yeah. The efficiency took a bit of a nosedive on this, which is interesting to see. The detachments are, as you said, they're very fluffy. Like the Null Maiden Vigil. Sorry, I gotta close something on my computer here. The Null Maiden Vigil is very cool sounding. It's got all of the anti-psyker tech you could ever want in an army, except it does nothing otherwise. Like 4 of the 6 strats require psykers to be involved for them to actually function, which is very problematic considering
it's going to be great against Thousand Suns.
Yeah, there's like 2 armies that actually have this. So it's really odd. So I don't know if we're going to see that. The Shield Host, I guess my takeaway from this, and this is, it sounds unlikely given what I've heard, but if there are really significant points drops that come with this and Custodes become a horde army or something, you could have some fun with this. Like there could be some play. But
Custodes are already at a shockingly high model count for what they should be. Like Custodes are supposed to be the elite of the elite, and people now are regularly showing with like 25 of them. So it's hard to imagine that the points would drop even further.
Seriously, yeah. With the durability, Shield Host being the durable one, getting effectively cut in half for most of these. Like we haven't seen the data sheets for a lot of the models, right? So I'm running under the assumption that with the 4+ Feel No Pain being a strat now, it probably isn't on the Warden sheets. It might be though.
It might still be. See. We know that Trajan's data sheet was cut off at the knees because he lost his Fights First, and he also is Ignore Mods was changed to only ballistic and weapon skill modifiers, which means that the Death Guard armor mod works. Mods to he doesn't ignore -1 damage anymore. Like it's huge.
Yeah, we'll have to see the full thing. It is certainly not looking promising though.
No, it's not. Now, on the flip side, and I can't believe that they released those codexes side by side because the contrast could not be more clear. We have the Necron Rider probably wrote this one if the AdMech Rider wrote the Custodes Codex. But Orcs look, oh my God, they actually might be a problem.
Yeah,
Take it away, Logan.
Orcs look incredibly strong with this. Some of the highlights to start to get the boring stuff out of the way. Well, boring. I mean, this is really good. Boys have sticky objectives now, which is already huge. Like that's a
Yeah,
great buff for them.
that's a fantastic ability.
There are a few things that are going away. I don't know if we have explicit confirmation of this, but it's been popping up everywhere. Badruck specifically appears to be gone. There are a few others as well. I think it's some of the
The
some of
fine cast characters are all gone, I think.
yeah. So, but I think everything else that's happening more than makes up for it. The sort of standout here from the conversations I've been involved in anyway, and what I've seen is the Green Tide detachment, which is going very similar, I think, to what it was back in 7th edition. So you always have your 5-up in Vol. You also reroll ones on it if you, well, actually, let's take a step back here. A lot of the stuff for Green Tide is focused on having huge amounts of boys for this. So all of these abilities give you something. And if you have 10 or more models, so minimum unit size, basically undamaged or larger, you get an extra ability for it. So you always have a 5-up in vaults, no longer just during the WoW. If you have 10 or more guys, you reroll ones as well. So a massive durability boost throughout it. There are some really good strats for this as well. 1 CP to reroll ones to wound, but full rerolls to wound if you're over 10. So super deadly if you've got these bigger units or unhurt ones. And one of the other, the two, I think, really crazy ones for mobility for this is for 1 CP, you add the current battle round to your charge. So if you're getting teleported around or you're just moving up and you're in late game, having a free +3, 4, 5 to your charge is
Well, not even late game,
insane.
just turn 2. A +2
Even
is
turn
huge.
2 +2. Yeah, like this is a massive thing.
Think about how like
quite fast.
game warping Angron's +1 charge aura is for World Eaters. That's one that you use almost all of the time.
Yeah.
And just starting turn 2, it's +2, and then turn 3, it's +3. This is absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's great. And then there's more. The other fun one here for 1 CP, you get the Unending Swarm style surge move. And I call it the Unending Swarm specifically because you can move into combat with this.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it even zanier, if you've got 10 or more models, it's a flat 6-inch when they get shot.
Which means you have to be over 7 inches away from boy units to shoot them reliably.
Yeah.
And that means that if you want to charge them, you either can't shoot the unit or you have to be 7 inches away, which makes your charge very failable. That, on the face of it, may not sound like the most game-changing stat in the world, but it's low-key, I think, the most powerful one they have.
Yeah, it's insanely good for it. So yeah, really strong stuff. Green Tide is looking extremely powerful. And as I say that, we'll talk about the other two that are also looking quite good.
I mean, they all look good.
They all look good. Yeah. So Bully Boys is another new one. This gives you a double WA as long as your war boss is alive. The second one only applies to knobs, mega knobs, and war bosses, which is still good because it's the basis for it.
Well, and their strats are also based on those units, I believe. So
Yeah.
it's the mega knobs and knobs detachment, but
Yeah.
like that one sounds ridiculously powerful too.
It does, yeah. If you want beefier orcs, I mean, they're already pretty beefy, but if you want beefy multi-wound orcs, I guess. So their strats, 1 CP reroll ones to hit, or if you're in the WA, it's reroll all hits. 1 CP for a 5-up fight on death, which is, I mean, it's not bad, but
if you're in the WA, +2 to the roll, so it's actually a 3-up fight.
there we go. I missed that in my notes, so that is quite good. 1 CP to force desperate escape if somebody wants to fall back from you, and they get an additional -1 if they're in WA. So you've got sort of a 50% chance of just killing guys if they try to fall back. And we
don't know if there's a vehicle monster restriction, but if there isn't, that means that if a knight wants to fall back from you on a 1 or a 2, it dies. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And the last one that jumped out from what I saw there is they have AOC now. For 1 CP. So your mega knobs are already quite durable, and they just got even more durable for this.
Well, because they have a 2-up save, right? So AOC on anything with a 2-up save is always extremely strong.
Yeah. Put them in cover, and you've got a flat 2-up against most stuff in the game.
I personally think this one is the more powerful one, even though the Green Tide and the one we're going to talk about soon, the Dread Mob, on the face of it, probably jump out more as clearly powerful, but I think Bully Boys is actually the winner here.
Yeah, there's play with all of these, which is
100%.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward.
This feels a lot like the Space Marine Codex in that you've got like 3 different detachments that are currently competitively viable.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be great. We've got a lot of orc players locally here in Ottawa. I got one on my team as well, so we're setting up some time to sort of tech through this as soon as we have points and
Hmm.
can build some lists. And last up for what we've got here is the Dread Mob. And this has a few small tweaks. I don't know how significant this is because I'm not an Orcs aficionado by any stretch, but you can have mechs that lead units now. Their gimmick for the detachment is they have a table with 3 different abilities, and you can roll on that whenever you're shooting. I think it may be combat as well. I may have misread it. But anyway, on a 1 or 2, you get sustained hits 1. On a 3 or 4, you get lethals. On a 5 or 6, you get +2 AP on critical wounds. And that pairs really well with an enhancement you can take, which lets you roll 2 dice on that table and get both abilities if you don't wind up rolling the same one twice. So quite good for that. And this pairs and sort of mitigates to a large extent losing Badrock as well for this. So one of their strats is at the cost of having Hazardous, you get full reroll to hits, which is great. And another strat is, I believe, on the combat side of things. For 1 CP, you get +2 strength and +1 damage. Again, with Hazardous for walkers. So if you've got the Killicans or
What's
what's
a
the big
walker,
one?
Logan? You know what's a walker? The Stompa is a walker.
The Stompa, yes, yes. So that's going to be great. I mean, maybe we'll see the return of Stompas.
I mean, it's a little expensive at 800 points if it doesn't change, but actually, you could buff it enough that it might be it would be still a bit of a meme, but it would win games.
Yeah, it would be fun to see. And the other crazy thing with this is Gretchen become battle line. So I think the count was something like you can have over 200 Gretchen in an army.
I don't want to think about this.
Yeah, it's at least you can't recycle them like with Guard and Crew. But
True.
Yeah.
Oh, that is the one saving grace is they didn't give the Green Tide detachment a full recycle strat. They do have Bring Boys Back to a unit, which in and of itself is extremely powerful for objective play, for shortening charge distances, but at least it's not an entire new unit coming back.
Yeah. Now, there is one thing I missed on this that I remember seeing somewhere, so I'm going to have you keep me honest on this. I saw something about teleporters. I can't remember if this was a meme or not, where you can you roll.
No, that was someone's memes.
Okay,
that was not real.
That would have been super cool. All right,
it would have been super cool, but let's not even.
We'll go there.
Mention it so as to not confuse listeners.
Yeah. Anyway, super excited for this. I think we're going to see a lot of orcs going forward. I think for team stuff, they're probably going to be a staple.
I think they're going to be incredibly solid for singles. Let's be honest,
singles
and probably
absolutely
probably a no-toe take in teams. Yes, I know we're very teams minded right now, Logan, but people play singles as well.
Weird.
And we have a few singles events coming up. They're on the smaller size because the big events around here are teams over the next few months. But there's like a monthly GT that I'm attending in the Dragon every month, and there's going to be orc players starting in May for sure.
Yep, and of course we'll have Capital City Bloodbath coming up in August-ish time frame.
Yeah, end of August. I don't know if the date has officially been announced, so I won't say it out loud. But it's not long after WTC, as usual, at the end of August.
Yeah, we'll have news on that after CanHammer teams this week. And I think just to close out the sort of turning stuff here as well, we talked about this on the live draw last night, but I forgot to bring it up earlier. For CanHammer teams, War Games Live is going to be there streaming, so don't feel like you need to wait for our episode next week to find out what's going on. You can catch it all live on YouTube at War Games Live.
Oh yeah, we forgot to mention this, but it is super exciting that Joe from War Games Live is going to be there in attendance. He hasn't traveled to Canada since I think Stud 2019 or something. So it's been a long time since he's been on this side of the border, and nice to see him come up and show the rest of the world that Canada too can have exciting tournaments.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to drown him in Tim Hortons coffee and poutine or something.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure he'd appreciate that. So that's those are our topic for the show today. Bit of a short one because we are doing 2 shows in back-to-back weeks, and we wanted to keep it on the short side, just give people a preview of CanHammer teams and discuss our first thoughts on the Orcs and Custodes leaks. Before we go, Logan, did you get any questions from listeners that we can answer?
I did. So one which I forgot to put in our notes was actually some feedback we got on the last show we did. It was something I had said specifically, so I want to clarify
Oh yeah,
clarify
you're a
this.
big fat dirty liar. Yes, I
I
remember
am a
that.
big fat dirty liar. It's true. So I was complaining about the price of old world boxes, saying the skeleton box is exactly the same models, and it sure is the same models, but it's twice as many of them. So I actually did a breakdown accounting for inflation and everything for it, and the skeletons box is actually almost identical value to what it was 20 years ago. So GW's pricing for old world is actually quite good in a lot of ways. So I wanted to issue that correction. If you are looking for good value from a GW perspective, old world like core battle line stuff is actually quite a good deal.
So you immediately got PMs from the old world grognards telling you were slandering their beautiful, beautiful game.
It was within minutes. It actually was.
I love
Like
it.
they got to the end of the episode and I got pinged on it.
I
But yeah,
love it.
anyway, I do appreciate that call out from the folks who reach out to me about it because it is an important thing. That's a game that I think deserves more hype than it has right now. More attention to it. Certainly I want to get into it.
It's been
as
sold
time
out
permits.
everywhere, so there's
Yeah.
definitely enough hype, or at least GW severely misunderestimated how much nostalgia was out there,
Yeah. It's like
because it's actually hard to find the boxes now.
it's the WoW classic debacle all over again, right?
Yeah,
You think you do,
exactly.
but you don't.
Yeah.
Well, we did. Anyway, for the question side, this is something that came in from Nick Blackburn, friend of the show. I think we've answered it a couple times, but it's directed specifically at me. So, Logan, what are your current sentiments about being back in the hobby? You were gone for about 5 years, and you've been back for one. How does it feel? Me personally, couldn't be happier. Always knew you'd come back. Well, Nick, I will say it's people like you that bring me back to this hobby. Yeah, no, it really is the community side of things. The 10th edition 40K is a ton of fun, despite some of the craziness that's going on with stuff like the Custodes book and AdMech and whatnot. The game is probably in the best place it's been in my career playing it. It's very fun. You can walk up to an event and you don't there are so few like gotcha mechanics in the game now as well that you can afford to show up to a tournament and not be just like an expert in everything and still have a good time and do reasonably well. So I'm really enjoying that. The community is wonderful. The models are great. From purely a hobby perspective, all the stuff that has come out, like in just the span of the last 5 years, that changed the hobby game is crazy. Like speed paints, contrast paints, all the new techniques, the new tools that are readily available. Like 5 years ago, maybe a bit more than 5 years ago, finding info on airbrushing was a dark art when I had stopped playing, and now like it's commonplace. It's super easy to go anywhere and pick up a cheap airbrush, and the technique videos and stuff is out there, whereas you used to have to go into a basement in Adepticon to attend a hobby workshop to find out how to actually do weathering properly with some of this stuff. So yeah, it's wonderful to be back, having a blast. Great to see all these events, all the new players for it, and that a lot of the OG fun folks are still around.
Yeah, and let's pick up on that for a minute, because I think it's something we can talk about that's very important. Is what makes this hobby what it is the people.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, Warhammer is a deeply flawed game in many respects. A game that we love, a game that is fun to play, but it's fun to play because of the people. There
Yes.
are better games out there, or at least arguably, but those games don't have for me anyway, I'm speaking for myself, I suppose, those games don't have the social aspect that Warhammer has. And for, I don't know, people like us who are, me anyway, middle-aged, busy job, kids, like it can be hard to create these relationships with other people. Like I love my wife and my kids, but I need these emotional connections to people outside of them, right?
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
place that I find those emotional connections and those close friendships has been Warhammer. And I think the fact that that this game is as wonderful as it is has 100% a lot to do with the person across the table from you.
Yep. Definitely agreed on that. And it is one of those unique games. Like there's a lot in this space, right? Like one of the things that keeps coming up is if you want, a competitive game, whatever, you play Magic the Gathering, right? Or it used to be War Machine. But those games are very non-interactive. Like yes, you're sitting across the table from someone and you're playing a game with them. You can have an entire game of Magic where you never say a word because the mechanics are so well defined. And in 40K, and I think the streaming revolution, as it were, for 40K with War Games Live and Tabletop Live and these other groups that are doing it has been huge in demonstrating this. is at the top end of 40K, a lot of gameplay, I'm not going to say all, but a lot of gameplay is very collaborative. Like you are working through things with your opponents, and it's the best games are the ones where you have friendly back and forth, where you've got conversation about the game, where you've got, you're poking fun at each other, whatever. Like it's a buddy relationship for a lot of it. And that's just something you don't see in a lot of other games because the mechanics are so very well written and very strict. You don't ever have to converse.
And this is something I say to my opponent every time now when I play someone I don't know, who that's happening less and less because I play an unreasonable amount of Warhammer. But whenever I play someone I don't know, the first thing I say is, let's have a collaborative game. Yep. I think that's very important. And 90+% of the population out there, that's how they want to play. It's very rare that you run into someone who's not going to want to do that. They do exist, but they are incredibly rare, and I believe are becoming rarer as the culture of the hobby is changing. Yeah. And like for me, all of my close friendships now are Warhammer people. It's kind of wonderful in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it is really good because you get, especially locally, we've got so many events that you actually get a chance to go out and socialize with folks very often and build those relationships.
And I've said this before, but some of these tournaments, the most exciting part for me is not even the playing, it's the dinner after, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good spot to call it for this episode here. We will be back next week to recap on a CanHammer Team tournament, likely with Chris and maybe another guest. We'll see what lines up for that. But otherwise, thank you.
And make sure to tune in this weekend and watch CanHammer Teams on the Wargames live stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully Logan and or I will make it on stream.
Yeah, we got to see how some of the early rounds go.
I like being on stream. I know some people are stressed out by being on stream. I like it. I think it's cool. Anyway, neither here nor there, but thanks for listening. Please send any complaints to Chris Haynes and his personal email address, not the one that actually I was going to joke that not the one Logan and I have access to, but I don't actually have the password for that one.
Me either anymore.
And I don't want it. So send any complaints directly to Chris and send any compliments to Logan and I. All right.
There we go.
Cheers. Bye-bye.